The 2021 Indianapolis 500 entry list has had some significant developments over the last couple of weeks, so it's time we make a follow-up video to the previous video that I made on the Indianapolis 500 entry list. And you should still totally watch that video, though it's not a complete list of all the cars that were available at the time of recording. It gives you a good sense of which cars may be available to be entered in this year's Indianapolis 500. This video in particular will focus much more on the potential drivers that could fill those seats. Now, drivers that are confirmed will be clearly marked in white, and drivers that are yet to be confirmed and or speculation will be marked in yellow. Clear as day, easy to figure out, bada bing, bada boom. It does look like there's almost certainly going to be bumping for next year's Indianapolis 500. This list will still contain 38 potential entries that could be in this year's Indianapolis 500, or have at least stated intentions of doing so. That list of 38 includes 19 Hondas and 19 Chevrolets, though I would expect that the entry list will be much closer to around 35, 36, 37. I think 38, again, is a pie in the sky. Absolutely everything happening that could happen, and more often than not, everything that could happen doesn't happen, and you end up with a slightly smaller entry list than maybe something you were looking at in November or December. All right, let's get into it, because I know based on the title of this video, you are going to want to know about Penske and their fifth potential entry into the Indianapolis 500 and who may be piloting that race car. So let's talk about it. Okay, so we'll start with the big one, which is Team Penske. Now, at the last video I made, I was convinced that there was only going to be the four-car team of Joseph Newgarden, Will Power, Simon Pagenaud, and Scott McLaughlin, the rookie to IndyCar, but of course a three-time Supercars champion. And I thought there's no way that there would be any expansion coming from Team Penske. Well, that was until a source informed me that Penske was behind the scenes making moves and preparing equipment to have a fifth Indy 500 entry. And I said, how? Why would this be a thing? But again, this particular source has been bulletproof in the past and assured me that these moves would not be made unless there was a fifth car being prepared. Since then, I've been able to back this information up with people with knowledge of the situation that there is a fifth car being prepared in the Penske shop. So, who could this be for, and why is this happening? Well, the why is a little bit easier than the who. And the why is, the easiest one, of course, is that Team Penske has a sports car program that is on hiatus, but they did not get rid of many of the employees who were actually a part of the sports car program. Most of those people are still on the payroll. Many of them are working on the Force Indy USF 2000 team, as well as Scott McLaughlin's his fourth IndyCar full-time. But my understanding is this fifth car would also be crewed by team members or former team members of Acura Team Penske. And you would assume that eventually they will be brought on to whatever LMDH program that Penske ends up signing on to in sports cars in the future. The second reason is purely speculation on my part, but it makes a lot of sense. Because when I heard this, I said, what reason would Team Penske have to enter a fifth car? Yes, the employee part makes sense. Giving some of the people he's got on the payroll something to do makes sense. I think there are larger reasons to this, and it will lead into who I think is driving this car in this year's Indianapolis 500. So, Penske, of course, owns the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And I don't know if you noticed, but 2020 was a very, very difficult year for the Penske Corporation with the acquisition of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Marshall Pruitt recently reported that the Speedway lost around $80 million in ticket sales. And as we know, there are some bad feelings from the fans, whether justified or not. There are some bad feelings out there and unhappy memories about the way everything this year went down. So what is Roger Penske to do? Well, it's put a big star in an extra car You've got the people already. You've clearly got the cars. And if it's a big enough star, as we've seen with people like Fernando Alonso in the past, it's essentially free advertising. Well, it's not essentially free advertising, but it gets you more mileage in the media, on social media, to have a big star in a car than any kind of a Super Bowl ad or a television ad could ever get you. Entries drive this race and drive the interest in this race. And of course, the knock-on effect of that is an extra car in the field, even if it's fielded by Team Penske, means an extra car for bump day. So there's also that additional storyline that can be created by Penske entering 5 cars. But the most important thing would be, who is the star? Who is the big attraction? Who could be the big attraction? Because it's a very short list of drivers who are A, qualified, B, ready, willing, and able to be able to drive in the Indianapolis 500. And again, I have no inside information on who the driver is. This is purely speculation, but based on everything we know, I think this is for Kyle Busch. And here's why. We know from last year that Kyle Busch was approved by Toyota to drive a Chevy-powered car in the Indianapolis 500. He had actually put together a program in 2017 to race in the Indianapolis 500. That was nixed by Joe Gibbs, and many people speculate that the team he was going to drive for in 2017 was in fact Team Penske, though that's never been confirmed by Penske or by Kyle Busch himself. Kyle has stated intentions to race in the Indianapolis 500, and it seems like after his bad year in stock cars, I wonder if Joe Gibbs might be even more willing to try to keep his driver interested and happy going forward by allowing him to branch out into other motorsports. Yes, there is an on-record story from last year that Tim Cindric said there was absolutely no chance of a Kyle Busch entry in the 2020 Indianapolis 500. And the reason they were so quick to dispel that potential speculation last year was because the announcement that Kyle was approved to race at Indianapolis came so late in the entry deadline for the Indy 500. To put together a car in January, or starting in January, when that news came out, would have been a monumental task even for Team Penske, so they opted not to do it. But Roger, knowing that Kyle Busch is interested, knowing he has to make a splash for his second Indianapolis 500, knowing that he has to change the narrative from what happened in 2020 to what is happening in 2021, he needs a big star to do that. I think the stars have aligned to allow Kyle Busch to race the Indianapolis 500 for Team Penske. But again, we'll have to see. We have to first have official confirmation that the 5th entry is happening, but again, my source is pretty solid on that. I expect it to happen, and right now, I'm leaning towards Kyle Busch as that driver. All right, now that we got that out of the way, let's go through the rest of the field as quickly as we can, because I did spend a lot of time on Kyle Busch. Chip Ganassi Racing, that's been locked in. That's lock, stock, and barrel, ready to go. 4 cars: Scott Dixon, Alex Palou, Marcus Ericsson, and Tony Kanaan in the number 48 car that Jimmie Johnson will race for the majority of the year. Andretti Autosport. Now, currently, I'm expecting them to do the traditional 6 entries they always do. There are 5 drivers we have a really good idea are going to be there, like I put in the last video, though it's important to note that Ryan Hunter-Reay and James Hinchcliffe aren't officially confirmed by the team yet. The 6th car, there hasn't been a whole lot of rumbling about it, but if I was going with my gut, I kind of feel like Stefan Wilson will find some sort of a way to get himself into that 6th seat at Andretti Autosport. He has history with the team. He has the tenacity and the drive and the willingness to work to get that seat. I think he will. I think he's the best candidate, but again, we'll have to wait and see for an official announcement. Defending winners of the Indianapolis 500, Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan. Now, they have tested Antonio Felix da Costa, and I think there's a very good chance of him running some IndyCar races next year, but my feeling right now, if you put a gun to my head and asked me, what do I think the lineup of 3 drivers will be? Graham Rahal, Takuma Sato, and Spencer Pigot. I think they will keep the 3 drivers that helped them win the Indianapolis 500 in 2020, and I don't see any reason outside of a very large check being brought to them to oust Piggott to change that up. Meyer Shank Racing. Now, I talked about this in the previous video, that apparently they already have a 2-car team with Jack Harvey and Alio Castroneves, but apparently there are some talks that they could expand to 3 cars to have a third female-led entry with Jackie Heinrecker, who has worked with Meyer Shank Racing in the past in GT racing. Heinrecker wants an Indy car driver who is a female, and I think there's no other candidate really qualified with the experience with Shank and Heinrecker other than Catherine Legg. So if that entry happens, whether it's with Meyer Shank or with somebody else, I think almost certainly dollars to donuts, Catherine Legg would be the driver of it. Arrow McLaren SP. This is a team that has totally been confirmed now, locked in at 3 cars. Pato O'Ward, Felix Rosenquist, we know them. We've known them for quite a while. And the third entry is one that I speculated would be the best fit for the team anyway, given what Zach Hollywood Brown likes in a driver, particularly a driver in that Indy 500 seat, one that's just so clickbaity. Juan Pablo Montoya, Indy 500 winner, previous driver for McLaren and United Autosports, which is the sports car team that Zach Brown owns and operates on the side with McLaren. It all made too much sense. He's an experienced driver, and even Sam Schmidt has tried to get Juan Pablo Montoya in the past to no avail. This will be a strong 3-car program. Ed Carpenter Racing, traditionally a 3-car team. Rinus VeeKay, Ed Carpenter, lock those 2 in as the Indy 500 drivers. The third driver, totally dependent on sponsorship, though we have had recently some confirmation that apparently Air Force is in talks and very close to re-upping with the team, which would mean that Connor Daly would be the third driver for Ed Carpenter Racing. Dale Coyne Racing. Now, there's been a lot of moving and shaking in the offseason with this team. 3 unconfirmed drivers, at least for the Indy 500, as we speak right now. We'll talk about the 2 full-time seats first, and we'll also lump in the Rick Ware Racing Bird entry, as apparently now it's fairly common knowledge that the Rick Ware Racing team is only leasing a car from Dale Coyne. They're trying to get sponsorship to either do the full season with Coyne or just the Indy 500. So that entry is now lumped in here, and you'll see as we come up on the screen, these are the 3 drivers I think will eventually end up in Dale Coyne Racing. Pietro Fittipaldi, who will be making his Indianapolis 500 debut for this team. Charlie Kimball, who, while I think he would be a better fit returning to Carlin Racing, I think he's going to end up at Coyne. And then the third seat, which would be the Rick Ware Racing affiliated entry, would be James Davison as usual. AJ Foyt Racing, traditionally a 3-car team, but currently only has Sebastian Bourdais officially confirmed. Now, that being said, they do have an announcement tomorrow on who their second full-time driver is going to be. Now, there are 2 drivers that have come up in conversation quite a bit recently. They are Romain Grosjean and Dalton Kellett. We'll see which, if either of these drivers are confirmed tomorrow in the press conference. But it seems like all signs are pointing to one or both of these drivers being in a seat at Foyt next year. Carlin Racing, another 2-seat team that doesn't have anything confirmed as of right now, though it looks like we may have a bit of a Manor Marussia reuniting with Max Chilton and Felipe Nasr in those seats. Now, Max Chilton much closer to being confirmed than Felipe Nasr. Apparently, it's just kind of semantics at this point whether Chilton gets confirmed at the first car for Carlin Racing next year. And Carlin certainly has worked to get a second car on the grid, and it appears that Felipe Nasr would be the front runner if that program happens. Dreyer Reinbold Racing, another team with 2 seats and 2 unconfirmed drivers as of right now, but again, the expectation would be they will continue to have continuity, and that continuity is Sage Karam and J.R. Hildebrand. I don't think really you could see any other driver in these seats. Maybe an Oriol Servia, but that would only be dependent on whether or not Karam or Hildebrand suddenly do not have any funding or any desire to continue with Dreyer Reinbold Racing. Juncos Racing. So this is great because this was a team I was very shaky on whether or not they would have a program for the Indy 500 in 2021. But apparently, according to a recent Instagram post, they are preparing a DW12 chassis with an aero screen, so that would indicate that they are making moves to be on the Indy 500 grid at least for next year, and you would imagine that Kyle Kaiser would be the driver if this program does indeed take place. And this is the shakiest of all the shaky team driver combinations on this list, and I only mention this because of the fact that there has been nothing reported to the contrary that this is not going to happen. But Top Gun Racing, to me, it doesn't smell like an entry that will actually happen. But if the Top Gun entry does happen, they have named R.C. Anderson as the driver, and again, until they have a car, until they're rolling out for practice, I would be very, very skeptical of this. But again, we're putting this on the list because nothing has been reported to the contrary that it's not happening, and therefore we have to assume there's at least a chance and put it on this list. So there you go. This is what the Indy 500 entry list looks like right now. What do you think about my speculation on this Penske entry, this mystery Penske entry that's kind of being put together behind the scenes as we speak right now? Do you think I'm completely full of crap? What do you think about the rest of the entries? Do you think I've got a pretty good sense of where the drivers are headed, or do you think that some teams are going to go in some different directions? I'd be very interested to see what you have to say in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube, and I will see you in the next video. Subscribe for more motorsport and IndyCar and Indy 500 content.